All right, so today we are going to be moving on to section 6 in chapter 7, which is having to deal with percents, decimals, and fractions. Now yesterday we were just looking at percents. We were looking at how to write a percent as a decimal and how to write a percent as a fraction. So today we're kind of just going to be reversing that. We're going to be looking at how to write a decimal as a percent and how to write a fraction as a percent. So we know that 1 over 2, 1/2, 0.5, and 50% are really all saying the same thing. And, 1 over 2 is written as a fraction. Same thing as 1/2. 0.5 is also a way of writing 1/2 as a decimal. And 50% is another way of saying half of something as a percent. So these are all equivalent ways or equal ways to write 50% or half. Okay, so let's do some practice. So we're going to start off with looking at writing decimals as percents. Okay, so we're going to write some decimals as percents. So the directions are typically going to tell you to write a decimal as a percent. That threw me off a little bit because I was repeating myself. But that's what your direction is going to tell you. Write each decimal as a percent. Now there's a couple different ways you can do this. The first way is to use place value. Okay? So if we're given 0.3, the first thing we want to do is write the decimal as a fraction. Okay, so 0.3 is the same thing as 3/10. That's how we read that decimal, so that's how we could write it as a fraction, 3/10. Okay, but we still don't have a percent, so what we're going to do is we're going to write an equivalent fraction with 100 as the denominator. And I'll show you what I mean. So we're starting with 3/10, but now we want to write an equivalent fraction that has 100 as the denominator. So what do we do to go from 10 to 100? Well, we multiply by 10, right? And we know that with fractions, whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do the top. So I'm going to multiply 3 times 10, which would give me 30. Now this looks kind of like something we did yesterday. When we would write a percent as a fraction, we started off writing it over 100. So really the last thing we have to do is we're going to write the numerator with a percent symbol. So my numerator was 30, and then all I have to do is tack on the percent symbol, and that's it. So that's essentially what we just did. We wrote 0.3 as a percent. So we went from decimal to percent. So that's one way you can do it. You can write the decimal as a fraction, 3 over 10. Then you can write an equivalent fraction with 100 as the denominator. So I wrote 3 over 10 is equivalent to, I had something over 100. I multiplied by 10. And I got 30 over 100. And then all I'd have to do is write the numerator with the percent symbol. So I wrote 30%. So it's pretty simple. There's just a couple steps involved. Now there's another way that we can do this, another method. Or before we do that, let's do one more example. So 0.43. So the first thing we're going to do, like we did before, is to write the decimal as a fraction. And if I were to read out this decimal, I would say 43 hundredths. So the way I'm going to write that as a fraction is 43 over 100. Now before, we started with 3 over 10, and then we had to write an equivalent fraction with the denominator of 100, but we already have a fraction with the denominator of 100, so we don't have to do that step. It's already been done for us. So now all we have to do is write the numerator with a percent symbol. Okay, so 43 is my numerator, and I just add the percent symbol. And we can see that these are equal. So it's especially easy when you have a decimal in the hundredths place. All right, so now let's look at our second method. And honestly, this one might be my preferred method. I think this is the one that I tend to use more. It just is a little bit easier for me. So in this one, all we're going to be doing is multiplying by 100. And yesterday, we looked at how to turn a percent into a fraction by dividing by 100. Remember, like if we started with 43%, we wrote that as a fraction as 43 over 100, and we divided 100 into 43. And we saw that shortcut way where we could just say 43 and move the decimal over and get 0.43. So when we divide by 100, we move the decimal to the left 2 places. So what do you think we would do if we're multiplying by 100? Well, we're going to move the decimal to the right 2 places. So we're going to multiply by 100. So really all we have to do is move this decimal over to the right, and that should give us 74.31%. And then, we're going to add the percent symbol. So it's going to read 74.31%. And that's all you do. So I really preferred this method. And let's just double check to make sure that this actually worked. Let's make sure that multiplying by 100 does move that over twice. So I'm just going to do 0.7431, and I'm going to multiply by 100. Okay? Now, if I multiply all of these by 0, I'm just going to get 0 across the board. So I'm just going to go ahead and omit that one, but I still have to add a placeholder. But the same thing would happen with all these numbers in 0, so I'm going to omit that one and add another placeholder. And now I can multiply the rest of these by 1. So 1 times 1 would give me 1. 3 times 1 would give me 3. 4 times 1 would give me 4. And 7 times 1 would give me 7. Now you have to remember, you have to add that decimal back, and you have to see how many numbers are behind the decimal. Okay, so if I count, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers behind the decimal. So I start at the end, and I move it 4 times to the left. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can see that I end up in the same place I did here. So that works. All right, let's look at another example. We're going to multiply by 100 again. So if we start with 0.023, and I move the decimal over twice, it should give me 2.3. And then I just have to add the percent symbol. So that would give me 2.3%. So that's a lot faster and definitely the way that I prefer. And you'll probably find that you like that as well. All right, so the last thing we're going to do is we're going to look at, now we're going to write fractions as percents. So we just looked at writing decimals as percents. So now we're going to write fractions as percents. So your directions will tell you to write each fraction as a percent. Okay? So again, there's two methods we can use. The first thing is similar to what we did before. So you're going to write an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. And you'll see that that's pretty similar to the way that we went from a decimal to a percent. That was one of the first steps that we took to write a decimal as a percent. We wrote it as a fraction, and then we wrote an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. Okay? So the first example is going to be 4/5. Okay? So I want to find an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. Okay, so to go from 5 to 100, what do I multiply by? Well, I'm going to be multiplying by 20. So we know what we do to the bottom, we do to the top. Okay? So 4 times 20 would give me 80. Okay? And we know that all we have to do next is just write the numerator with a percent symbol. So we would get 80%. Okay? So another method is to use division to write the fraction as a percent. Or sorry, to write the fraction as a decimal and then write the decimal as a percent. So we're going to use division to write the fraction as a decimal. Okay, so let's start with the example of 3/8. My lights cut off on me, so I had to go get back up so they would come back on. Alright, so we're going to divide. So we're doing 3 divided by 8. Now 8 can't go into 3, so we need to add a decimal, add a 0, and 8 can go into 30. How many total times can 8 go into 30? I believe just 3 times. So 8 times 3 is going to give me 24, and 30 minus 24 is 6, and I need to add a 0. Now, how many times can 8 go into 60? I believe 8 times 7 would give me 56. And if we subtract, I would be left with 4, and I have to add yet another 0. And bring it down. And 8 can go into 40 evenly. We can multiply by 5. Okay, so we're left with 0.375. So now I need to change 0.375 to a percent. And we know to do that, we just multiply by 100. So we move the decimal 2 places to the right. So we would get 37.5%. Right, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Today, our classwork is going to be page 315, numbers 11 through 26. That's going to be 16 problems. So once I let you go, you're going to do just those 16. And it'll be a mix. Some of them you will be going from fraction to percent. Some you'll be going from decimal to percent. And some are going to ask you to do both. On your classwork, it looks like you're just going to be doing one or the other. And then on your homework, you're going to be on that same page. You're going to do 27 through 53 odd. And there are some other questions that are going to ask you to compare a percent to a fraction or a decimal to a fraction or a decimal to a percent. So for those, you're going to have to convert them so you can decide if they are greater than, less than, or equal to. And that is going to be a total of 14 problems. And then you're going to have that conversion worksheet again. Sorry about that. You're going to have this conversion worksheet, and you're basically just going to do all of the ones that we didn't do yesterday. So that's going to be 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, 10, 12, 13, 15, and 16. And these, they either give you a decimal or a percent, so you're going to have to write it as a fraction, as a fraction here and as a percent over here. Or if they give you a fraction, you're supposed to write it as a decimal and as a percent. Okay, so that should be pretty easy. It sounds like a lot, but I'm willing to bet that pretty much everybody will be able to get these 16 problems completed in class, and I think you will be able to get a jump start on your homework. And I really think you'll have no problems with these. Obviously this video will be posted, so if you need to go back and look at any of those examples again, or if you missed anything in your notes, you can take advantage of that. As always, I'm here to answer questions. If you get to working on your homework later and you find that you're having a little bit of trouble and you need some help, feel free to email me or come in the morning. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm here around 7 most mornings, and I'm happy to help anyone who needs it. So good luck, you guys. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll continue tomorrow.